You're listening to Living with Lewy.
Well, as promised, I wanted to begin this podcast with sharing my story, and it's really not unlike a lot of the stories that I see on various Facebook feeds and whatnot affecting other people with Lewy body dementia. My official diagnosis came in September 7th of 2022, but there were a lot of things looking back that were certainly letting us know that something wasn't right, and we weren't just quite getting the answers nailed down. 2020, when the pandemic started, I lost my job. I was a risk manager for a large government agency. They said that in their notes to the folks at State's Unemployment, their notes said that I was having a difficult time staying on task and completing tasks on time. I didn't really see that in my day-to-day work. And I'd never had any type of evaluation that was negative, never had any type of disciplinary action taken against me. However, I guess in this state, they're at will, so they can let you go for really no reason. But I found it kind of interesting when I ran across the notes in the unemployment screens. Just looking back and thinking about how things were here at home. At home, I was having difficulty staying on task. It was difficult for me to keep things around and go, well, what in the world was I doing? And just a lot of confusion. Then we started having balance issues where I had started off with me needing a cane occasionally. Now I pretty much use a cane most of the time. At any rate, the balance issues forced me to give up one of the loves of my life, which was riding motorcycles. And anyone that rides one knows that if you don't have balance, you got a problem. So we discussed it, and I went ahead and sold my motorcycle. As things started to be taken from me that I loved in my life, I liked my work. I enjoyed the work that I did. That was no longer. My motorcycle riding was no longer, and things were just changing drastically. Then I started having some hallucinations, and you start wondering what's going on. You feel like you're just absolutely losing your grip on reality. I guess maybe to a degree you are, but as my independence continued to be attacked, it became more and more difficult to swallow. And nobody had answers. My neurologist was saying, well, perhaps it's Parkinson's. Maybe you have a little dementia. And so finally, they ran some more advanced tests. They referred me to Johns Hopkins Hospital, September 7th of 2022. And the neurologist that I was seeing had suspected Lewy body, and after MRI showed damage into the front temporal lobes of my brain, Johns Hopkins in September of 2022 confirmed what she thought, that in fact that I had Lewy body. I know this started and I think kind of got masked because I went through a bout with cancer in 2017 and a lot of radiation. At the end of that, there was a diagnosis of Lermite, which is a little bit of interruption of the communications that take place in the back of your brain area. So things started to deteriorate as the balance continued. I started to experience these episodes of what I call fog. You just feel like you're totally detached from the reality of where you are. You're like you're floating out there in the world, and you're not really present. And I'm sure that other people that live with Lewy body can certainly relate to what I'm trying to describe. At one point,
I was traveling to
the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and I'm down the eastern shore of Virginia, and all of a sudden I'm being pulled over, and the officer said that I was going 96 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone. I'm like, what? I never drove that fast. Did I exceed the speed limit from time to time? You betcha, who doesn't, okay? But never do I drive at that kind of a speed. Looking back on that event, which was very unpleasant, but at any rate, I feel like I had fallen into that foggy, daydreamy state and was probably totally removed from the reality of what I was doing, driving this car down the eastern shore of Virginia, and totally lost track of what speed I was going, all of it. I mean, it's just, so I look back at these types of things that have happened and look at what the symptoms are and what I experienced. And the more I've learned, I honestly think that was some of the early signs of the fog taking over and fogging what I wanted to what you should be concentrating on. At any rate, I've also been talking with my siblings, which I happen to be blessed to have 8 wonderful brothers and sisters. When I look back and was talking with them, they could see a difference in every aspect of what was happening. So, like many of you that I've seen that post your stories, I went through a long period of decline in various aspects before someone finally put all the pieces together and said, yep, it's Lewy body. So when I got the diagnosis and I read just a little bit about it, I really didn't have a lot of education about Lewy body dementia, but the prognosis that you see and you read about are not real favorable, and I think I sunk into a very deep kind of depression because I lost so much of my independence, and yet there were little answers. And finally, when the answers came, it's a hard pill to swallow. And it is kind of like grieving for the loss of someone. I was grieving, I think, with the loss of all of these things that I was able to do before. That's very difficult. And when you are now, kind of at a point where people are wondering what's going on, I started having things mess up, like cook breakfast and leave the pan on, things like that, things that were not necessarily safe. And when I look at that, I just say, we've made some steps here, and a lot of them were suggested by some of my therapy team to maintain at least some independence in the house, so that I didn't have to become dependent on a caretaker, which would be my wife. This has been very difficult for her. You see the frustration on her face. And when we got the diagnosis, one afternoon I had some invaders in my garden, which I don't care for. But at any rate, these little squirrels were having their way with what vegetables we were able to grow. And so I was going to give them a little warning with popping my pellet gun. At any rate, I also had in the house a 9mm. Well, at that time, I did not know it, but I've since found out. As I went looking for the pellets for the pellet gun, couldn't find them. Where are they? And I'm going through the house and I'm looking, and then I thought, well, gee, maybe they're in the closet where I keep my 9mm. I go into the closet, my 9mm is not there. Now I start wondering, okay, what have I done with something as sensitive as a 9 millimeter. I have my granddaughter coming here on a regular basis, and so I was confused and looking for it. And finally, I was talking with my son. He said, "Well, Dad, you can't find it because I have it." Well, he had visited, I don't know, a week or so before. Unbeknownst to me, my wife wanted it removed from the house because she was afraid that maybe this depression that I was experiencing would lead to me wanting to harm myself. And I understand why she did it. She did it because she loves me. How can you complain about that? I mean, my goodness. So at any rate, she told me that she had given it to my son, and I said, I'm not upset that you did it. I'm a little upset that you didn't tell me because it did throw me into a little bit of a panic mode. I understand why she did it. I just asked her that if she was going to do things like that in the future, please take and let me know. And I understand that she probably didn't want any type of confrontation with me over this issue, and I appreciate that. I also feel like knowing what happened would have prevented me going through this panic state of ripping the house apart and trying to figure it out. Since we know that we've known about my Lewy body, I have read a number of things about it. I've certainly part of a Facebook group that I read other people's stories, and I started to realize that, you know what, you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there that are experiencing the same things that you are, or similar things to what I was. It's not the easiest thing to live with. However, I have learned through the education process, through working with a therapy team, that there are things that I can kind of fight back against. And some of that is my balance, my speech, things that the therapy team have been able to work with me on have given me back some of my stability and feeling a little bit more like I'm winning instead of sitting back and wallowing in an area of depression because you've lost so much of your independence. I've actually gone to the point now where I drive very, very seldom. And if I do drive, it's usually with my wife in the car, so that if I start to have much fog or whatever, anything that's happening, sometimes spatial awareness is a big problem for me. So I like having the ability to just pull over and say, "Honey, I just can't do this right now, so would you please take it?" And so that's kind of the rule of thumb for when I'm driving. And when I talk about spatial awareness, I'm talking about being around crowds of people, or I always feel like there's something there, that will make me look and maybe overreact. So is the right word that I'm looking for, the right term. I overreact to things that are happening around me, and that seems to happen quite frequently. And so I really don't like going out to places like the grocery store too much, or any place where I'm going to be around a lot of people. I overreact sometimes to what's happening in traffic situations when my wife is driving the car. Now, I feel perfectly safe with my wife. She's a great driver, but I do tend to overreact to some of those things. One of the things that also I think hurts, and not sure that everyone can relate to this, but it's painful to watch my wife as we go through this journey together. Watching the frustration, hearing the frustration in her voice. Sometimes she forgets, or that this is me. This is who I am now. And that I'm not trying to do something on purpose. And sometimes she'll ask me about a conversation that we had, and I don't remember any of it. And so she's kind of gotten to the point now where she can say, all right, and just start and tell me again without getting frustrated about having to do that. She also has learned to recognize when my stress level is going up and we're out someplace, and she just comforts me. She'll grab my hand and say, "Hey, honey, it's okay." And that's been a big help. Just to have that comfort is priceless. So, at any rate, that's watching her go through this journey is painful as well. So, I think that not only do I have Lewy body, my family, my loved ones, they have it too. They're sharing in this journey. My wife especially, I mean, my goodness, she just loves me unconditionally to the moon and back. She's here to support me no matter what, and she doesn't really think about anything other than the fact that we're still together and we're blessed to have every day. So I guess one of the things that I wanted to do here with this starting this podcast was to let some of you go ahead and share your story, tell your story, share your frustration, and let your caregivers tell their stories because that may help other caregivers. Certainly, in the future, we're going to be bringing on some of my therapy team to discuss some of the things that they found when they first started working with me versus where we are today and what we're doing. And what's interesting is that the therapy team is learning from me and I'm learning from them. One of the things that they constantly tell me is that I have the ability to articulate to them how I'm feeling, what's happening. So they work on whatever the problem of the hour is, if you will, because as you know, with Lewy body, you don't know what you got till you get out of bed, and that might change before you have lunch. And so it can change very rapidly. For me, the fog can come in and be just really thick at times, and other times it's there, but it's not. I'm not feeling like I'm overly overwhelmed with that fog. So I'd like for people to be able to share their stories because I think that when you first get diagnosed and you're reading some of the stuff that you can find on the internet, which I think the internet can be a great tool at times, but at other times I think it's be a dangerous thing to read too much, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword, if you will. I would like to invite you to tell your story and invite you to share because when someone listens to your story, and I can only say this from experience of reading other people's stories and whatnot, you start to find out that you're not alone, and you start to see what other people describe, what they're going through, and you realize, hey, that sounds familiar. It's not just, and so I think that when you start to talk about it, and to hear other stories, it helps to deal with the day-to-day ups and downs that you go through when you have Lewy body. So I think that I'd also like to give people an opportunity to share their successes, share some of the things that have worked for them. Some of the strategies that they use in coping with various parts of Lewy body. Also, caregivers, what do they find that works for them? I know that celebrating successes is every bit as important as any of it. The small victories that you get
you need to hold on to those because they are victories, and they need to be held on to, and they need to be shared, and people need to hear that they're not alone. B, there are some successes, success stories. There are people who are leading a fairly full life with Lewy Body, and they're doing it for longer periods of time. And I think that's something that needs to be shared, and people need to hear, especially those that are initially diagnosed. You just feel so alone, and I think that telling your story, sharing successes, is important. And so I invite you to come on to this podcast and share. I know I said at the beginning of this that I wanted to share my story, but one of the things that I have noticed as I start to put my thoughts down onto the podcast is that my recollection of everything that transpired is limited, and so I will be having my daughter be joining me to help me to recall some of the things that maybe I'm not readily able to. So my daughter Abby Benson will be joining me to help the recollection, and also to share the parts of my story that she remembers, and the things that affected her. So hopefully you'll be looking forward to that. And like I said, we certainly invite caretakers, family members, certainly those with Lewy Body, therapists, anyone that has information that they want to share, or a story that they want to share concerning Lewy Body. You're welcome to join us. If you're interested in sharing your story, please go to the Living with Lewy podcast on Facebook, and you can go into the About information and find my contact information. You can contact me via email, or my phone number is also listed there. Please feel free to contact me, and we'll get you scheduled. So thank you very much. We'd like to thank you for joining us for this edition of Living with Lewy.